Telecom continue to rule the world. Uzi goes godlike.
This is what peak League of Legends looks like!
Welcome back, everyone, to MSI in Reykjavik, Iceland. After 4 days of competition, it is now or never for the teams in Group B, as only 2 of them will move on to the Rumble stage and stay alive at MSI. The Mad Lions, they are so far undefeated after 3 games, and we'll see if they give us another nail-biter in Game 1 as they take on the fast-paced Wildcats. There they are, the Wildcats, looking excited. Oh, and we're getting a little message.
Oh, smooth transition.
Oh, well done. I'm Sjokz, joined by Ender and by Bwipo. Hi, Bwipo. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, it's nice to be back.
It's great to be back, but I can't start the show with you as a guest without just asking if you have anything to say about anything in particular.
And your role swapped to the analyst desk.
And your role swapped to the analyst desk.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Right. Well, we have a full day to get it out of him. Now, looking at our standings, Group B and C are still subject to change as they wrap up over the next 2 days, but we have locked in our Rumble reps from Group A. RNG and Pentanet GG, they will lock their spots in our Rumble stage. And I just want to start by talking about Pentanet and their first time that an OS team ever makes it to the next round. It's beautiful to see.
It's amazing. And I think that as far as expectations went for this team, people would not have been surprised to roll in and see them not win a single game. And yet they found a way to adapt to the meta and beat Unicorns of Love in a true best of 5, spread out over the course of 4 different days. It did come down to that crucial final game. Pabu's carved this in the jungle. It's a pick I'd been waiting to see, and it looked amazing.
Honestly, the Karthus was really interesting because Chaz has been playing a lot of these AD mid laners. Now, I didn't quite see him use the TP like I like to, but you know, maybe I'll have to try the exhaust myself sometime.
I mean, it worked out. It was situationally very, very good. And this was just one of my favorite moments of MSI so far. And exactly what MSI and what these tournaments are all about, just racing. Oh
I think the staff is more excited than the players. I love it.
Yeah, I guess the players were like, well, this game was very convincing for us. But yeah, it's super. And again, just to reiterate it, I'm sure you've heard it before. First time for OS that they make it to the next stage of an international tournament. And that is just so important because they didn't have a region at the beginning of this year, and the LCO took over the torch. The broadcast was amazing, and the players made it to the next stage. So, great stuff. And to take a deeper look, rather, at the team from Down Under, Dash was able to catch up with Pentanet's Pabu and get his thoughts on their historic win.
What's up, everyone? Dash here after a historic victory for the Oceanic region, and I am joined by none other than Pabu. Pabu, it has been a marathon of a day. We went all the way to the 7th game and the tie break, but you ended up pulling it out. Just give me your initial reactions to pushing yourselves through to the Rumble stage.
I'm so bloody proud of the boys, honestly. Like, after our first game versus you all today, it was really rough, and we played with lots of fear, and we didn't go. But then we played the next game as RNG, and we just sent it, and then we just sent it again and again, and you know, we win the games.
That has become the theme of the day, just sending it. And that RNG game, even though it was a loss, was one of the most exciting and entertaining of the day. But I do want to refocus in towards your matchup against UOL, because ultimately the matchup against UOL is what determined it. But it was essentially a best of 5. Strewn over multiple days, and you took it in 3-2 fashion. Break it down for me from start to finish. How did it evolve over the days?
So going into the start of the event, we really didn't have much idea of how to draft the game. We hadn't played, we hadn't scrimmed for weeks after our playoffs because no one in OS was scrimming. We can't play anyone else, so we didn't really know what was going on, and so we kind of just got gapped in a few drafts. And then we figured out a good draft and we played it and we won. And then we didn't really have an answer to Nidalee, so we just started nuking the jungle pool. I'm a really flexible player. I have a really deep champion pool. So as soon as we started getting a Nanosick off his comfort, he couldn't really do anything inside of the games. He picked Lee Sin and Kha'Zix, and both of those champions are just absolutely not real. So as soon as I was playing to my strengths and he was off of his comfort, it was just really easy. And all the boys played more confidently throughout the games. As we ramped up, our engages were better, our engages were faster. We just started, getting things going. We took fights on our terms, and they would always make mistakes with positioning. So, you know, we punished them, and we just had some better drafts coming to the later side, allowed us to pull it through.
Grew into your own throughout the stage for sure. You mentioned your own flexibility in jungle pool, but we got to also talk about some of the flexibility shown by other teammates. Most notably, I'm looking at the mid lane, the Zed catching everyone off guard. Where did that come from?
Jesse just said to me, he's like, I'm pretty sure if we play AP jungle and AD mid, we'll just always win. And he didn't know what to pick. And he's like, what do I play here? And he's like, I'm pretty sure Zed's broken. And he hasn't played the champion in 6 months. We've never scrimmed it. Like, we haven't touched it, but I don't know. We've been talking about it. It's like, it's at the top of LS's tier list. It's dominating solo queue.
It's at the top of your tier list. We know that now.
I've lost way too many games to 420 Weeaboo Slayer. So like, you know, you just have to slam the lock in, and we played the game well, and it was really hype.
All right. Well, again, super impressive across the board. You kind of mentioned some of the obstacles that the team has had to work against. Again, the region itself kind of gets disassembled. You guys ultimately come out of it, and then, you know, without those kinds of practice partners, why is it that you think that this set of guys, this team, this time around was able to achieve what you've been unable to achieve before in the past?
I think other teams before have had really good chances of like coming through, and honestly, it's like almost a bit of a disappointment that they didn't, because I think they had some really talented rosters in the past, like the Mammoth rosters of past, the Legacy one we sent recently, all really good and all like came pretty close. But I don't think there's much that sets us apart. I just think that having a good environment is like really cracked for sure. Like the way that we recover from our games and are able to adapt and not go into it with like no tilt, our heads are always up. It just really allows us to, you know, kind of reset and take every game as it is.
All right, well, I got one more question for you, and that's all about looking forward. First time you're going to the Rumble stage. Well, a little bit about what your expectations are for you guys as a team, and when you look at the other two groups, maybe who do you expect to get out, as well as who do you expect to really be putting up fights against in terms of trying to make it even further?
I think it's really hard to like challenge against the top teams. I think we're all super excited to play against Damwon Gaming. But I hope Cloud9 makes it through, because I really like playing against Cloud9. They just play the game super fast and super aggressively, so it's fun to play against. But I think it's a huge learning experience for us. We don't get this opportunity to play against like international teams very often. And yeah, just like the geography of Australia kind of limits us in that area. So it's like a huge learning experience for us, and hopefully we'll just improve over the course of the tournament and, you know, make it back to Worlds.
Well, the improvement has already been evident. Pabu, the only person in the esports industry that gives me hair envy. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. I want to congratulate you again on an absolutely historic victory.
Thank you.
Keep it up, man. Go celebrate, not too hard, maybe only one shoey for this victory, and then we'll see you in the Rumble stage. Thank you again.
Thank you.
What a fun interview, and of course super happy that finally the credit is given that is deserved. I of course mean to 420 Weeaboo Slayer. So the other team that got out of that group, and I know that we love talking about Pentanet. I think they really deserve to be talked about. But RNG also got out of that group. Now I guess the reason we're not talking about it that much is because Bwipo, you expect the first seed from the LPL to get out of this group specifically. So what are our expectations now that they move on to the Rumble stage?
You mentioned this group specifically. I would say the expectation is that they move out of the Rumble stage as well.
Yes.
Obviously, RNG, looking at one of the best teams, had the least amount of hiccups out of any team. Had that one game, I believe it's the continuation of this early game turns into a whole banger of a game in the end. But ultimately, other than that small hiccup, it does seem like RNG has the most dominant performance so far.
Yeah, ultimately, like, all their players looking very, very strong. I think as far as like the standouts for me, Ming, his movements around the map have been absolutely phenomenal. And also getting to see Xiaohu go into the mid lane, not just once, but twice during this tournament. It's always a pleasure to see him back in home.
That it is. I'm super excited to see these teams face off, as you say, in the next Rumble stage, and then to be expected also in the knockouts. 8 wins. Yeah, they beat everyone. 3 times. No, 4 times.
Well, they beat everyone, but they only played 2 teams. So
that's true, but they beat them 4 times.
That's true.
It's very impressive. So we'll see how that evolves for RNG as they move on to the next stage. But as for us, we will be looking at Group B today specifically, and there's a lot more up in the air. And we're going to talk a little bit about the meta coming into this day, because with 25 matches now under our belts, we've seen a variety of picks and bans, including a rather surprising ban thrown at Amumu. Still don't know what that's about. Let's take a look specifically at the mid lane picks and what we've seen being prevalent so far.
Yeah, because yesterday we talked a lot about the jungle, so I wanted to look at like the standout mid lane picks right now, and it seems to be a continuation from the spring meta in a lot of regions, right? We're seeing Victor and Orianna continue to be very, very dominant. Victor was just catching on, I think, towards the end of spring, and now he's like very much in vogue in the meta right now. And I think that as you look with the power pick junglers getting banned out, the Morgana, the Rumble pretty commonly, we're seeing a whole lot of Udyr still, which means like you already wanted to pair scaling mid lane mages with that, and I think Orianna and Victor do the job.
Making sure you get some type of scaling when you are playing something like Volibear and Udyr, it makes a lot of sense. Victor, I think, is just ultimately the runner-up to Orianna. People try to get Orianna. Orianna gets banned away or picked by the enemy team. You match it with Victor, and you feel comfortable going into mid to late game stages with a Victor. It's not as extreme as, let's say, a Ryze, where the scaling, he does have it, but is much more of a side lane scaler rather than a teamfight mage. And when you are showing up on an international event like this, having some late game scaling into the team fights is always reassuring.
Very important. We've also seen a very different look for some teams, right? Who put the Lee Sin in the mid lane, for example, who we've seen actually flexed in a couple of roles. What do we make of that?
Well, I think that when you look at like the scaling options, right? Because if you're taking the more early aggressive jungler like an Udyr or a Volibear, you need the scaling mid. But if you have a Rumble or Morgana, those champions are going to outscale pretty much any jungler you're going to put them against, apart from maybe a Karthus. So maybe Karthus with aggressive mid like a Zed definitely does work. Of course, the Lee Sin, so good at any sort of early skirmishing, whether it's in the river or roaming to side lane. So I actually really think that taking AP jungler plus Lee Sin, if you know your opponent has a really strong side lane they need to play around or get through the early game, look to roam and attack those lanes, and that can be very powerful.
I mean, Lee Sin to me is very similar to the Qiyana, very similar to the Zed. He has a lot of assassin-like properties where he has a huge amount of kill pressure on the enemy mid laner, which means that if you can leverage the kill pressure, you're generally speaking going to be able to influence the map. Now, his weakness is the fact that one-on-one, he doesn't really get anything going because, well, we're playing at a high level. Lee Sin is not going to find random solo kills. However, once he gets to the river, gets his mid priority and starts ganking people, that's when he's really, really powerful.
So do you think he has to be kind of a hybrid of the mid player that looks for the roams and kind of in a jungle role, as in also providing his lanes with the ganks? Is that the key?
Yeah, I don't think he's really a sit mid and farm type of mid laner. He doesn't bring any type of scaling, though you could argue he's like a bit of a bruiser that can scale. You know, he can grab the Gore Drinker, Starax, and be bit beefy, do a lot of damage, but ultimately, you don't expect Lee Sin to kill multiple people like a Victor or Orianna would.
Right, and then looking at Lucian, another one of those AD mid laners, in a similar vein to Lee Sin, right? Like you can be strong in lane and you do offer physical damage, does offer more scaling, like you've mentioned, Bwipo. But I also think that with a champion that can get mid prio so easily in the Lucian, it's very hard to actually get him out of lane. Again, teaming up to either hit side lanes or even invade the enemy jungle, we've seen be very powerful.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to play Lucian or Tristana even. Yeah. Playing these AD carrying mid lanes has the same upside of something like a Lucian, but you've got way more scaling there.
For
like
sure.
Putting in Lee Sin top lane in this case makes a lot more sense because you compare Lee Sin to like another bruiser like Set or Nocturne, it isn't as big of a discrepancy in scaling as Lee Sin compared to Lucian or Lee Sin compared to Victor or Orianna. It's a very big difference.
Yeah, but it does seem to me, which is really cool, that you can go for different styles. You can go for kind of a myriad of champions for now. And just out of curiosity, Bwipo, what do you think about the jungle meta right now?
It looks pretty interesting. You're full clearing, as usual. However, the difference is that it does seem like you've got a little bit more scaling going on, which means going into team fights and whatnot. It does seem like a team fight competent player might be able to shine in the jungle.
Okay, very interesting. So while the meta shapes up on the Rift, there's plenty of activity elsewhere in Iceland. Laure is bringing us a stampeding Icelandic fun fact of the day.
The Icelandic horse is one of the purest and oldest breeds in the world. They were brought to Iceland by the Vikings in the 8th century. And to keep Icelandic horses disease-free and guarantee breed purity, Icelandic law prevents horses from being imported into the country, and exported animals are not allowed to return. Icelandic horses have heavy double-layer coats protecting them from the harsh climate of Iceland. And pound for pound, they are the strongest breed in the world.
Thank you so much, Laure. You know what? I think they're onto something. So the exported horses are not allowed to return because of law. If there was somewhere that if the EU players went to NA, but then they had to stay there forever, because if you make that choice, you're not allowed to.
Wait, no, but we don't want that to be, that's not what you want to do.
Really?
Yeah, because then I'd never be allowed back here.
Oh, that's true. We want you to come back. But thank you so much, Laure, and I hope you stay safe out there in Iceland. I hear it can be really, really windy. Here, though, we're ready to take a look at the games ahead of us with the Mad Lions, PSG Talon, Pain Gaming, and the Fast Pay Wildcats, each vying for a spot in the Rumble stage. So the scoreline looks very convincing for Mad Lions, but I think that's not really the reality of the games we've seen them play.
For sure. The games have been far closer, especially between the Wildcats and Pain Gaming. I think Mad Lions have struggled to take their early laning advantages and convert that into a clean and a quick win, especially like you look at their game against Pain Gaming, like they completely shut down Robo in the top lane, but then all of a sudden this 1-6 Camilo is still opening up the base, and with just 2 extra seconds, that is a Wildcats win.
I mean, it does look like Mad Lions players are playing pretty good. Like, all of them are individually shining in the early game. It's just a little bit of, I wouldn't say overconfidence necessarily, just a few hiccups, I think, is the right way to put it. It's nothing I think we should be concerned about. However, for today, I think if we're going to be looking at the Rumble stage and expecting the returning champions in the LEC to have a great performance, it would be good for our confidence if we could have 3 clean games.
I think that's super fair. When it comes to the stakes, Mad would lock the next stage with 2 wins. And if they were to win against the Wildcats, it means that there's only 1 case in which they end up playing tiebreakers. So that's looking good, but we want them to get there convincingly. Moving on to the middle of the pack, the TCL and the CB LOL, they have been waiting for their shot to make it to the next stage. There's been sporadic success. There's been good times for the CB LOL a couple of years ago. The TCL has been on top also as recently of Worlds last year. But yeah, it's going to be difficult for those 2 teams.
I mean, right now it's looking dire for the Wildcats sitting at 0-3, so obviously they need all the wins they can get today. As for Pain Gaming, they do have 1 win under their belt, so now it's about finding like which team can you chip away with PSG or with Mad Lions, because they are almost certainly going to need a win over the Wildcats in order to have a chance of moving on.
Honestly, the creativity from Pain Gaming has been really reassuring. I think that even though they had huge goal deficits, they've been playing pretty well around the fact that actually killing the Nexus.
Yeah,
you know? That's ultimately the goal of the game, right? So them managing despite these early game deficits, it's pretty interesting to see how Pain Gaming's crawling back.
The Nexus, I thought it was all about the Scuttle Crab.
Yeah, there's a little bit in between too. I wish we could tell the Mad Lions that. That would be perfect. No, but also I think that as far as Pain Gaming and the Wildcats in particular, I think their early game planning and execution has had some missteps too, like hitting lanes that they're never going to be able to return to because of more passive supports, early TPs. These types of blunders you will be punished for against PSG and Mad Lions, and they cannot make those same mistakes today.
Great point. If anything, the fans are behind them. Twitter is absolutely lit up with pictures of Robo
What
right
day is
now.
it?
I don't know which day it is. So finally in this group, we also have PSG Talon, PCS, the spiritual successor to the LMS Bwipo, and then you would expect them to get very far. And honestly, this roster has been promising both domestically and now also so far at MSI.
The most interesting part for me about this lineup is Maple and Hanabi. Last time they played in MSI, they ended up first in groups.
Yeah.
So if they managed to make it to the
group.
Rumble stage, I was in that group. I lost to them. Point being here is that honestly, I do have great expectations for them, and I do expect them to be able to contest the Mad Lions for a game here today. Last time they met up, I honestly feel like the early game dive that was botched, Mad Lions called in like 2 to 3 2 teleports. Elioyo was there to counter, and from there on, the game was really hard to play for PSG. So if they manage to clean up some of that early game, not have the game explode as much, I do believe they'll be able to contest for a real game.
Yes, we'll see indeed. And another important section of the Group B story is the bot laners. All 4 teams have distinctive bot lanes and distinctive AD carries. So I'd like to take a look at them, starting with Holy Phoenix from the Wildcats. This man is an absolute legend in the region, and he is very important to his team. And a little birdie told me that you played with him on a team, actually. So what can you say about him?
It's actually my first official match I ever played for League of Legends was with Holy Phoenix on my team. So I was very, very much a rookie back then. I didn't last too long on Dark Passage. I was a little bit untempered, perhaps. But my experience with him is there's always been a super strong AD carry mechanically. And if you manage to get him the items, he's going to be able to show what he's capable of. And it's exactly what we saw in the game against the Mad Lions. Even though Carzzy had some very hot feet in the matchup in the bot lane 2v2, once Holy Phoenix got going on his Tristana, he managed to grab multiple items, and the game looked very close.
Yeah, I'd also say like that bot lane got completely blown up because of an early TP down there, not checking off all the boxes on their list. So I think Holy Phoenix has a lot more that he's left to show us, even with a 0-3 start. This is the standout player, I think, that you need to look for the Wildcats to succeed today.
Very important. Secondly, I'd like to talk about Doggo, of course, the story of Unified not being able to make it to MSI due to health reasons. And Doggo is, of course, part of Beyond Gaming, the team that PSG Talent beat in the finals. But where do we land on him after the first round?
Well, ultimately, like, I came in after watching Doggo a little bit in the PCS, actually very hyped for him because I felt like he's a very mechanically gifted player that sometimes just does the craziest of things. The flashes in, Tristana going jumping all the way forward too. So this is a guy that I was expecting to see that, and he's been a little bit more tempered, a little bit more on a leash here. And I think that that's kind of the nature of jumping into a new team at such a big event, is that he's kind of filling the role for his team. But I don't know. I'm hoping we get to see a bit of that personal flair today.
Yeah, me too. And it's going to be important for PSG talent as well. Next up, we talked about Pain before, and you can't talk about Pain Gaming without talking about BRTT. Now, high hopes for BRTT, again, domestically, absolutely crushing it. But honestly, at MSI, the numbers have not looked so good so far.
Honestly, like the biggest issue I have with Pain Gaming is their early game. They're not looking too hot. They're coming into mid games with several thousands of gold leads of deficit. Their champion drafts, like they rely, in some of their drafts, they rely on getting a little bit further ahead, and they're not managing to get anything going. That said, like I mentioned earlier, once the game starts being played, the creativity does come in, and honestly, some of the experience from probably BRTT is coming to show. And well, at the end of the game, we sometimes see the Nexus exploding on the other side. We had the first game they won against Wildcats, even though they were very far behind.
But they make it. Yeah, they are creative in the later game. If they can just shore up that early game, not just obviously BRTT, but everyone, then they are in a better position.
Yeah, and it's a little shocking too, because I feel like for BRTT, you know, the Draven, kill you in lane type of guy, like this is almost the best situation to be put into, because you look at like PSG Talon, right? And you have a new bot laner, you know, coming in and being paired with Kaiwing. Surely you can have a shot against that. You look at Mad Lions, and they've had an inconsistent year in the bot lane too. So like in theory, this is where BRTT can shine, but it hasn't been that way so far.
No, we'll hope it comes out today. And speaking of Carzzy, he's gone crazy at MSI so far. No, we talked about this in rehearsal. Bwipo said, well, yes, but actually that is to be expected.
It is to be expected. Ultimately, the competition they're playing against, whilst respectable players, they're not the same level as a Hansama Trimby, as a Reckless Mickey X. So for me, I expected this much, because honestly, if they don't pop off in this group stage, I would be very worried if they make it to the Rumble stage going forward.
100%, especially because I think if you look at Carzzy and Kaiser over the course of the year, it's been almost a little bit streaky, I would say. You know, the regular season was a little bit down for them. Then the first half of playoffs looked very good. Finals, a little bit different. So I think that getting the confidence, being back on the international stage for Carzzy, especially for a player who underwhelmed big time at Worlds last year, this is exactly the start LEC fans want to see.
Yeah, the Mad Lions definitely want to do better, and they have a fantastic start. We'll see Carzzy and Mad Lions in our first game. And before we get to that, let's hear from their coach.
Mac, thank you so much for joining me ahead of your games. A second round robin starting today for you guys. And it feels like we had close games all across the board, even though you guys are 3-0 now. Have you been surprised by the results so far? And what's your take on the group?
I mean, I think the group is really fun. We knew as soon as we saw that it was a group with us and Turkey and Brazil that it was going to be really, really fun. I feel like every international tournament that Turkey and Brazil play, their games are always like mega explosive somehow, even if the results don't always go in their way. So we already kind of expected that coming in from the games that actually happened. I mean, they were a bit closer than I was hoping they would be, to be honest. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I necessarily expected that.
Yeah, following up on that, actually, and the closeness of the games, we noticed that Mad Lions have insane early game stats. Kind of difficult for you guys to close out games from now on. So I want to know, how is mid-game going for the Mad Lions, and have you been able to identify the issues during the previous games?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, since coming into the tournament, we worked like a lot, almost exclusively on our early game, because when we were matching up against the top teams in scrims, we felt like that was a big area that we were lacking in. So our focus has been much more on early game, and a lot of the time in scrims, we're like doing really well in the early game. I think we've improved a lot. And that's actually meant that our mid-game practice hasn't been quite as good or consistent, and it's not been as big of a focus point for us. So yesterday we just took some time to kind of reevaluate and go over the things that, you know, we did well in the LEC summer and playoffs, and, you know, what makes us a good team in the mid to late game, and just have some reminders and some, you know, basic rules about fundamentals for mid to late game. So I'm pretty confident that that will be completely fixed going forward. I mean, maybe not completely fixed instantly today, but for sure it will be better. I mean, there are always problems. You know, nothing is ever perfect. You're never a complete team. There's always this kind of balancing act that you have to do, where you work on one thing and then everything else gets a bit, I guess, rusty. or it's not so present in your mind. So yeah, we're kind of doing the readjustments as we speak.
All right, readjustments, and that's a work in progress. Talking about the other teams in your group, as I said, you are on top of the group right now, 3-0. So it seems like teams are going to be looking to take you down, pointing at some weaknesses. How do you plan on tackling this?
I don't think there's anything particularly special that we need to do. I don't think we've really shown much. We had 2 drafts that were very similar in our first 2 games, I think. I think that actually right now we have a decent amount of depth in our champion pools and a decent amount of variety that we can play. And there's a lot of stuff that we haven't shown. I think the draft that we did against Pain was a bit of a random one. It kind of just happened that that we were like, oh, these champions are great in this situation, and then later we thought that actually perhaps maybe they weren't. So yeah, I think there's still a lot that we have to show, so I'm not particularly worried about being targeted because I don't think we've shown too much. Interesting,
some tricks up your sleeves, I hear. You're going to play the first game of the day against the Wildcats. Anything you want to tell us about this matchup?
I wouldn't say so particularly. I mean, the main thing is just that the fan interaction around all of the matches that we've had against both the Turkish team and the Brazilian team have just been like really, really fun. There's a lot of stuff going on social media, which is hilarious. So I think in terms of the actual matchup, I would say maybe one of the big ones to focus on is the top lane matchup. I think Armut obviously has been having an amazing tournament so far, and he's playing against people that he's played against in the past in Turkey. And I think Starscreen has also had a really good tournament as well so far. So I think that's a really interesting matchup.
All right, we'll keep an eye on top lane then. But for now, Mac, thank you so much for the interview and good luck on the games today.
Thank you.
And Sjokz, back to you.
Thank you very much, Laure. Always a pleasure to hear from Mac. And he says, yeah, our mid-game hasn't been that well. Bwipo, can you identify with what he said there about, well, in scrims we were focusing specifically on the early game, so the other things were not as close in our mind, and that may be a reason why it's not going so swimmingly?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense, right? You focused on one thing, they show up their early game, all of a sudden you notice, oh, we forgot some small details.
Like we should do Baron sometimes.
The devil is in the details when you when you play League of Legends, especially, like when you're playing at a high level, a lot of things are going on at the same time, and if you're not all on the same page, things can go wrong.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, you of course played the Mad Lions a couple of times and a lot in scrims also in the LEC. Is this par for the course for them in your mind, that they are good in lane, but that they falter in the mid-game, or is this something new?
I think it is pretty new, honestly. Like, I think they've always been a really strong early game team, but not this good.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. They're up against the Wildcats. Important match now. This was a very close game, I would say, too close for comfort for the Mad Lions. And then you have to give credit to the Istanbul Wildcats. And I think Max said it there already. The top lane matchup is going to be really important as well. Armut has been someone that I was looking out for specifically because I was not too sure. I mean, he came from the TCL. He did really well in the LEC, but then coming to an international tournament is something completely different.
I think Armut has been so interesting to watch because I think he's actually only gotten better from the start of the year until now, right? Like, I thought for the majority of the regular season, like, he was good at his job, but he wasn't like stellar, standout, anything like this. But then playoffs in the LEC rolled around. He's starting to kill people. He's starting to pull out the crazy pocket picks like the Wukong. And now at MSI, it is still continuing to elevate on stuff like the Lee Sin, getting solo kills up there too. So I'm curious to see how high this guy can go now.
I mean, honestly, he's been playing really well. I mean, I'd love to see him compete against some of the best in the world, which is something that we'll have to look forward to if they make it to the Rumble stage, which they should. I believe they only need to win.
I know you're being
game.
really careful. You're all like, if they make it to the Rumble stage, but
I'm pretty confident they will. Now, with that in mind, like obviously he's been having a great performance on the Lee Sin, especially busting out another pocket pick, which we hopefully we'll get to see more of.
Definitely, and he's up versus Starscreen, and I think that's a good shout by Max. Starscreen has had a fantastic game so far, and he has been the surprise to me. I think we focus very much on Holy Phoenix, but he has really been holding his own, and Morin could be a difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those hard ones for me because I think that Armut has been such a rock for the team that I'm curious to see if the Wildcats can get an edge up towards the top side of the map. I think they're going to have to decide which area of the map they do end up playing for. And I think as far as the games have gone, it feels like if you leave Armut in a 1 versus 1, maybe you need to get some more people involved up there.
Yes, exactly. Now the Wildcats, the Istanbul Wildcats, are a new champion in the TCL, signaling a bit of a new era, so the hopes are always incredibly high. I think if we look at it in correct me if I'm wrong, I've always considered the TCL in most recent years as kind of one of the strongest of the non-major regions. On top of that, we see a lot of talent, you for instance, and I think Caps as well, for instance, Humanoid, a lot of players that play in the TCL that then end up in the LEC specifically. So we know there's enormous quality there. But specifically, the game plan here. We've said already, lane is going well for Mad Lions. Early game is going great for Mad Lions. The Wildcats are a team also domestically that after the laning phase and when they get to group is where they find their stride. So Bwipo, should the Wildcats now cater their game plan against the Mad Lions to this, being more late game, more team fight focused, or what do you think?
I think it's important to pick a couple of champions that will make sure they get there. Ultimately, Mad Lions is looking like a really strong team early game. They have First Blood, First Herald, First Dragon, First Tower. They're pretty much taking everything first on the map. So the question for me is really, how many champions can you pick that will still allow you to scale, get to the mid game where Mad Lions is making these small hiccups, and then try to get a win in the late game?
Yeah, for sure. I think Holy Phoenix for them, obviously going to be the late game carry, playing the AD carry position. I think the look for them would be to try and get one of the power pick AP junglers on the patch and a physical damage mid laner. I think that this is a time where if you try to attack mid lane first, and then you can play towards those side lanes like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, this could be a good way for them to try and combat Mad Lions in the early game, because I don't think it's going to be through just individual laning. It's going to be more of a team effort.
It's a bit of a catch-22, right? Because if you give up the lane prowess, then you run the risk of falling behind too far that you have no way to come back in the game at all. What are some picks that we think would work? We've talked about the mid lane champion diversity. What would be a good pick here, knowing what Humanoid has played so far, which he loves to go for the control mages, but he also pulled out the Kog'Maw, for instance.
Well, I think that, like we were mentioning before, like Lee Sin is the early game pick that you look to dominate with, but doesn't have the same scaling elements. If you wanted to go AD, like sort of marksman in the mid lane, like we were talking about, like either a Lucian or a Tristana, both usually going to win the majority of their mid lane matchups. Both can roam, can fight, but of course have that late game scaling insurance that with a couple of Mad Lions mistakes will allow you to scale past them.
I think honestly what makes the most sense for me is not looking at the mid lane so much, but making sure the top lane has a very stable matchup. Ideally the stronger bruiser, right? Armut and Starscream have both been the bruiser players, right? They're picking up multiple, like I see some Lee Sin, I see some Nocturne. I would like to see a Set. Why specifically Set? I think Set has a great amount of influence in team fights, can always initiate a team fight, deal a crazy amount of damage thanks to some of his new buffs, and it's the big boy bruiser. Set's the boss. He's going to win out in these bruiser matchups, and I think both sides would really profit from having that priority in the top lane and just being the stronger bruiser.
For sure. I love you set up the top lane too. It's a new era for the TCL. It's a new era for the LEC as well. But there's only one of these teams with the two-time TCL champion in the top lane, Armut. That's the difference today. That's why Mad Lions are going to win.
You wanted to give everyone who watched the playoffs PTSD for like saying new era and two-time TCL champion. I respect it. It's time for round 2 of the cat fight between the Mad Lions and the Wildcats as Group B fight for a spot in the Rumble stage.
This group is a tough one to know the expectations, because I think on paper a lot of people had said, hey, this looks like the most evenly spread out group.
I think we have kind of disrespected the other teams, which we shouldn't have done.
BRTT and T9 putting some work onto the Nexus turrets. They've got the first one. They turn their attention to the second. It starts to get chunked down. Paid Gaming have lost 2. They don't have the damage just yet. Mad Lions live to fight another day. The willingness to go for that play. It does show their desire and their drive, and it was so close.
Claramente a gente ficou abalado com essa partida. Acho que mais que a de ontem a gente tomou stomp.
Pain Gaming threw everything at the wall and came tantalizingly close to taking down the Mad Lions.
And we were expecting that we would go undefeated because we think that the only decent team that has like a good chances of defeating us is PSG.
What an incredible showing here from the European team. Absolutely dismantling PSG talent.
我觉得我们现在很有信心，再跟 Mad Lions 打一次的话，我们会赢下他们。就这次 MSI 的话，其实我们蛮有信心的。
For Wildcats, they're the first team on the verge of being eliminated.
Maçlar yakındı fakat kazanamayınca bir önemi kalmıyor. Sonraki maçları kazanmak için elimizden geleni yapacağız ve Rumble stage'i kalacağımızı düşünüyorum.
For all the teams in this group, it is showing that the games are still very close. These teams very closely matched.
Grubumuzdaki en büyük tehdit kim? Büyük ihtimal kendimiziz ya.
What we wanna do is make Europe proud.
我们已经等很久了，这次 PSG 即将拿到前所未有的成绩。
I play for this moment, you know, I practice for this moment, I live for this moment. To compete against the best and to show the world that Brazil can do it.